Welcome to another episode of the Business of AI podcast. And I'm pleased to welcome a very special guest to the podcast today. We have Steffen Hoffmann, who is the president of Bosch for Northern and Eastern Europe and the managing director in UK and Ireland. So, Steffen, welcome to the podcast.
Morning, Tim. Good to be here.
I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the work which you're doing at Bosch. But I wonder whether we could start off by hearing a little bit about you and how you started in your career, how you ended up where you are now, and then tell us a little bit about what you do in your role.
Yeah, so I've been with Bosch for quite a long time. It's almost 34 years. I'm not an engineer, you must know that. So thanks for inviting me, nevertheless, to talk about AI. But it's already maybe something that you probably need to do at Bosch. Regardless of your background, you need to be interested in technology and in technology solutions. So for me, that meant mostly in my career, I was in positions in the automotive part of our business. I've spent a lot of time in Asia. I was based in Japan for 10 years, then in South Africa for 5 years, and I've been in the UK since 2015 with a short break in 21 and 22. So I'm now net, if you will, 9 years in the UK.
Fantastic. And I think what you alluded to there at the beginning in terms of not being an engineer or not being technical, actually the way that AI is now being used by businesses means that the changes, the transformations are really being felt by people who aren't the technical people. They aren't the developers, they aren't the engineers. And I think that's part of what you're looking at Bosch, isn't it? Could you tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing with the Compass as well?
Yeah, well, so AI plays a big role in our operation, and we apply it in a lot of different functions. We apply it in R&D, so you will these days almost not find anybody in R&D anymore that is not using AI in one or the other way. But it's also playing a big role in manufacturing, particularly around things like quality control. And it's more and more being used and utilized in administrative functions. So we have a very good application, very interesting application in HR. And obviously the idea is always to handle complexity.
Yeah, what we often see with businesses is that there's two main areas where they're using different AI-powered tools and services. One is within the organization, and as a business that's making things like Bosch, thank you for sharing some of those examples of where you're actually using it within the manufacturing process or the quality control. But the other part of it is also the consumer adoption. So is that a part of what you're thinking about in terms of how you can get more of your consumers to be interacting with chatbots or feeling more comfortable in the way they interact with Bosch?
Yeah, when we do that, and it starts actually with understanding better what the consumer thinks about AI. So what we do is we have, and we've done this for a number of years now, call it the Tech Compass. So we are asking about 11,000 people in 7 countries, including the UK, what they think. This is not just about AI, it's more about technology in general. But recently, as you would imagine, more questions are obviously around AI. So the most interesting answer is how prepared do people feel with AI. The last worldwide figure was 56%, and that already tells you what the issue is. It's a bit of a divide. There is quite a number of people who can say the glass is half full rather than half empty. So there's quite a bit of people, and this number is slightly increasing, that feel quite okay, quite well prepared. But there's also a large number of people that still need more input. I mean, what you can see recently, or if you ask why is that, there's a lot of media coverage on AI. It's almost the magical word of our time. Yeah. And that brings obviously a lot of people to be more interested in it. And then the second aspect, that's probably what you were alluding to, is what is the user experience of AI. A few years ago, it was a very abstract thing for most people. Now, recently, if you, for example, you do a Google search, which we all do every day, and there's an AI function, and people find out, okay, this is giving me a really good brief summary of instead of having to look into 5 or 6 different suggested pages, I get this summary. And I think it's all these things that at the end bring the general public slowly to the party.
And do you think that's a problem for consumer brands if those consumers don't have the confidence and don't have the skills to be able to engage with those? Does that impact upon your business in a way?
Yes and no. I mean, the question is rather how do you make sure that people get educated? And there's 2 ways to do it. One is the user experience as such. I mean, and the more you utilize AI on a daily basis, and I mean this example with the Google search machine, that's obviously the easiest way. I mean, you're almost dragged into AI without ever having to make a conscious decision to use it, and that's the easiest way. You just have a positive user experience, and the other dimension is to provide training, which we are doing. We have trained 65,000 people in Bosch already on AI, and that is what you obviously need to do when you have somewhat more complex tools to use.
So that's amazing to hear that you've trained that many people, and from that sort of that viewpoint of being responsible for helping train people, what advice would you have for other businesses who are maybe looking at what their responsibility is to getting involved in training, and how could they start to engage with consumers in that way?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would probably say is do not. I mean, we said earlier the magical word AI. Let's not exaggerate what it is. I mean, AI is a fascinating new technology that is evolving quickly. We don't really know where it is going. It would be. Haven't talked about regulation yet, but we can. For us, if you ask the 65,000, what did we do and how did we get them interested? I think the starting point is that people don't view it as a threat to their job, but as a tool that enhances their job and makes them more efficient in what they're doing.
I think that's a really important point, because there is so much negativity and so much anxiety amongst the general public around AI, because they often will read those big headlines in the newspaper about it taking their job. So I think you're absolutely right that if you can actually present that as a way that enhances and augments and helps them, and it's going to deliver across all of their career, that's a really positive way of being able to do that. Are there specific areas that you think are still skills gaps within the workforce as you're looking at it from a very high level perspective?
Well, what I would probably say is that our engineers in R&D and in manufacturing they've been the trailblazers for the utilization of AI, and they're probably more advanced, more used to it already. They've potentially from the beginning there were less concerns with an engineer. If you look at the administrative area. And just maybe give you this example of HR, that we have a tool in place in our HR that we call Rob. And what Rob is essentially doing, you feed it with a few sentences that describe a complex situation in HR. And then basically what that tool does, Rob, it pulls all relevant labor legislation, it pulls all relevant internal HR guidelines, and it proposes a solution or a way forward. So this is something your classic HR person is probably a bit skeptical about initially. But after using it a few times, they understand how much they benefit from this tool, which is essentially taking care of a complex of reducing the complexity. What it does not do, and that's basically a principle of the way we apply AI in Bosch. What it does not do does not execute a decision. It proposes. And then there's always a human in place that looks at this solution, filters it through the Bosch values, it includes additional HR expertise of that person, and then that person is making the final decision. At the moment this is understood, this principle is understood, the concerns over time get less and less.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that example. It's a great example of how you can actually use an AI-powered tool in that instance to deal with the often complexity in the many different instances in HR, to provide the really relevant guidance and expertise there. That's a great example. So I wanted to also get your perspective on whose responsibility it should be to be developing these skills, because we've talked about quite a range of skills now. We've talked about the technical skills, we've talked about the sort of practitioner skills in HR, and there's also then we talked about the everyday skills. But within the UK, do you think it's the responsibility of government? Do you think it's the responsibility of businesses, maybe even the education sector? What's your perspective as to where those skills should be coming from?
I think everybody can do their bit. I mean, obviously, businesses have very specific use cases, and their training will then focus on those use cases. Now, if you talk about a more general education and enhancement of know-how, that is where government or the media could come into play. But ultimately, it is the responsibility of all of us. Obviously, we are all users. And if we want to use it, we are responsible for getting the necessary skills and training by ourselves. But there needs to be an offering. What I could imagine, for example, is the BBC as a public TV, and it does play a role in bringing forward important trends of our time. So they could offer trainings of different sorts that enhance the general knowledge about AI.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea there. There's definitely the need to have that broad program that is around everyday AI that everyone can get access to give them that confidence to start unpacking the basics. But then as you sort of go up and get more specialized, as a practitioner or as a leader, I think there needs to be more specific skills, to particularly, I suppose, driving that transformation within an organization. And maybe I could get your perspective on that, because you've been with Bosch for a few years. I'm sure you've seen the evolution of your company and the culture within the company. You probably saw the initial wave under the first digital transformation, I guess around sort of 10 years ago. That's a time frame when there was a lot of talk around digital transformation and changing the culture of the workforce. And then today there's the AI transformation. I wondered whether I could get your perspective on what that looked like, those transformations look like within Bosch, and what you've learned from that process.
I mean, it's very good, Tim, because you can actually draw a little bit from earlier big changes in technology. I mean, when computers became very complete, when the smartphone came in, and what you can see is always that initially you seem to have very extreme opinions on a new solution. It's either very, very good, you have people that embrace everything, or you have people that are extremely skeptical, and then over time that leads to a more and more balanced view on things. What you could see is certainly, first of all, these new technologies never eliminate jobs. They make you more productive, more efficient, and probably what it does, it increases the speed in which we as a society move forward. I mean, if you think of our parents or grandparents generation, I mean, my grandparents, they probably in their lifetimes, they had to learn how to use a telephone. And that was an experience that didn't really change much over many decades. If I look at my parents' generation, they were already in the second half of their lives exposed to that speed in which technology was developing. And that generation had to battle with that. And some, I mean, my parents are in their 80s now, and at one point they stopped being interested or trying to learn new things in tech, and then you need to find workarounds. Now, our generation, you and me, I think we are right in this storm. We are, and it's a fascinating time, right? It's in which technology is moving so quickly. It challenges us because we need to pick up new things almost every day. I mean, this term lifelong learning, I mean, if always say, okay, it's yes, we need lifelong learning, but you and me, we really know what it is and what it means. But it challenges us as humans and us as societies.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for giving us that sort of perspective across the years there. I think what it means now is that we have to be much more agile. We have to be much more curious. It is that constant process you mentioned of there's always new things to discover. So unless we have that sort of curiosity and that agility, but also the ability to test things out and to learn pretty quickly from testing things out. Yeah. I'm sure that's part of the process you're using at Bosch, right? In terms of like testing a few things. Could you give us a bit of insight into how you pilot things, particularly AI-powered projects? And is there a process or a mindset that you're using to enable your teams to feel confident to pilot things?
Well, that probably opens the discussion on regulation, whether it's government regulation or internal regulation. And again, if you look at these extreme opinions that exist, it easily leads to extreme opinions on regulation as well. You have people out there, and that includes some of the big AI names that warn of AI and said, okay, look, government, you need to introduce regulation because this is potentially really dangerous. I would not disagree, but the question is this the right time to do it? This is still a very young technology. We are developing, or we are moving very, very quickly. I would probably suggest to let it run, give it the freedom that it needs at this point. All the while, we should be watching potentially negative effects, and there is still time to jump in as a regulator or jump in as a company. I mean, you asked what is our experience at Bosch in R&D. There was a lot of, or some skepticism in R&D whether this would, or what this would do to the creativity of our engineers. Actually, now if you ask, most people will say it didn't do anything to harm the creativity of people. It is something in R&D. There's a lot of, if you think of a vehicle application, by the way, there's a lot of standardized work packages in a typical vehicle application. And if you can, shall we say, outsource that bit of work to an AI tool, it allows you as an engineer to focus on other things. And our engineers, if you look at the complexity of the new solutions that we're working on, for example, automated driving, don't worry, they will not run out of work. It's just the opposite. The question is always, how do we, as an engineer, an R&D guy, how do you become more productive?
I'd love to hear more about the research and development work, if you can talk about some of that. I know some of it might be top secret, but I'd particularly be interested to know how you are engaging with some of the R&D that's coming out of the UK universities or startups or innovators, and generally some of the projects that you're working on, because I'm sure it's fascinating. If you could talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I say this typically to politicians all the time, and then ask, okay, what excites us in the UK? And I say, the most exciting thing in the UK is actually the startup scene, which is very, very vibrant. You have a lot of companies. You have all the ingredients in the UK that the Americans have. You have top universities, Oxford and Cambridge. You have the English language, the ease of attracting talent from all over the world. You have the proximity to the city of London with all their venture capital and finance. But maybe you don't have the California sunshine. But that's about the only thing. And what governments can certainly do is not to provide funding. I mean, governments don't have money these days, but they can play a role in bringing these stakeholders together, in organizing a platform that creates a support network for the startups, and that is, I feel, that is where the Americans are much better than us.
So that's a really interesting idea there, because I think that maybe the government hasn't fulfilled that role of being able to bring together that ecosystem. There are organizations like us at UKAI, but there are others as well who are bringing together the community to try and ensure there is that sort of cross-fertilization of ideas between the smaller businesses, the larger businesses, and match up the sort of innovators with the companies that can scale. No, I kind of think it's interesting. And one of the other areas I wanted to ask you about was energy, and that's a big topic for us as well. A lot of people know that there's a big concern around how data centers are very power hungry. And that's a big challenge, because as the AI industry needs to scale, will it then need to have a lot more energy consumption, and what impact does that have on the environment? One of the areas that we've been challenging our members to find solutions for is how we can actually make that whole process much more sustainable. That could be through renewable sources of energy. It could be through greater energy efficiency within the grid, driven by machine learning. It could be through more efficient data centers, more efficient chip design. There's lots of different ways, and part of what we're excited about is that we think that there is really some unique aspects of the UK that will allow the UK to lead this green AI revolution. Now, I know that the Bosch have been heavily involved in a number of different aspects of that, particularly hydrogen. So I wonder if I could get your perspective on, what do you see as being the sort of the really exciting things which are happening in the energy space that might help with that green AI revolution?
Yeah, I mean, very, very important, probably the biggest question of our time. So yeah, energy, we need to decarbonize our energy supply. And the data centers that you mentioned, what they first do is they increase the demand. So there will be even more difficult to decarbonize simply because there's more demand. So the cake becomes bigger and bigger. If you look at where we are today, we have about 50% of our of our electricity coming from renewable sources. And now, if you think of switching everything to electric, to electrify road traffic, to electrify heating, industrial production, and so on, I have serious doubts that we will ever be able to produce all that electricity as green electricity from renewable sources here in the UK, simply because the climate conditions in the UK are not supporting this. You can produce green electricity from PV for between 1 and 2 cents per kilowatt hour in the Middle East, for example. So I think realistically, we will have to rely much more in the future again on getting this energy imported in the UK from countries in which the climate conditions are working better for renewable energy. And that is where hydrogen comes in, because if you have the situation that you have in the Middle East, for example, a huge production of green electricity. Now, how do you get that here to the UK where the demand is? You need something to store and transport, and that is hydrogen. That is where hydrogen comes into play. So I would imagine ideally a world where we have production of green electricity at low cost in those areas, and that you have on-site green electricity straight going into producing hydrogen via electrolysis, and then potentially also processing it on into ammonia or hydrogen-based synthetic fuels, which you could then transport via sea vessels to the UK. But and again, I think there is absolutely no alternative to it, because it will not be able to produce all that green electricity here in the UK. But what it means is we need to start creating a hydrogen economy. That means we need also hydrogen solutions on the application side.
Yeah, I'd love to ask you a little bit more about that, actually, because that's fascinating. And I understand the principle there, that it's easy to make some of those hydrogen, to make hydrogen in areas where there's a lot of freely available electricity, and it's almost like a storage media that you're then sort of transferring across the sea, making it sound easy. But then once it arrives in the UK, that's then the next challenge, isn't it? How do you actually get it from where the ports are, where you offload it, into where you actually need to have the energy? So there's a whole sort of infrastructure question there, but also there's on-site as well. Are we talking about actually having co-located hydrogen energy plants to change the hydrogen back into the energy that can then drive the data center? Or is there, and you know, I'm thinking of, are those smaller, more modular hydrogen plants, or are we talking about having a big hydrogen plant where all the hydrogen goes and then that feeds many data centers across a region? Do you have a perspective on that? Is that the thing?
Yeah, well, you see, when once hydrogen reaches the UK, what is the infrastructure you're looking at? I mean, if you are thinking of hydrogen in gaseous form, we have something we call the grid, which is using natural gas at this point, but much of the grid can be utilized for gaseous hydrogen, and you can heat your houses or your factories or your big apartment buildings with hydrogen. There's boilers, and this is, by the way, Bosch products. We have industrial and residential boilers that you can run with hydrogen. If you can obviously, when hydrogen in liquid form or ammonia reaches the UK, you can convert it back to electricity. That is not the most efficient way to do it, but it's theoretically possible. But what we see is that in road traffic or in industrial production, that you actually use ammonia or hydrogen-based synthetic fuels to, for example, to drive a car, or you see, there's various ways to use hydrogen in road traffic. There's hydrogen fuel cells, which give you a much better range. It's a very good solution for commercial vehicles. We have also developed a hydrogen internal combustion engine, which operates very much like a petrol or diesel internal combustion engine. It just drives with hydrogen. I guess what I'm saying is we should not, when we think of decarbonization, our current regulation is way too prescriptive. It tries to push us towards specific technologies, when we should have a much more open approach and allow various technology options to make a contribution for decarbonization.
That's really interesting, that point around the sort of regulation which is in place and how that might be constraining this innovation. What do you think is the current appetite, or maybe even the understanding of the potential of hydrogen by the government and by the energy bodies? I mean, is it just that they don't understand it yet, and that's why they haven't put in place legislation to help?
Yeah, I think it's well, the main aspect is that they are, we are coming out of a situation where we had quite a bit of dependency on an autocratic regime in Russia for gas, and this was a shock, to get very quickly being forced to get that out of our system, and governments don't want to again become dependent on autocratic regimes somewhere in the world. I understand that, but the conclusion they make is still, I think, wrong. The conclusion they make is, oh, we have to become independent in our energy supply. Look, we've never, I mean, ever since industrialization started in the UK, we have never been independent in our energy supply. We have to get some of our energy from other countries, from other world regions in the future as well. And we need to shape a portfolio that minimizes the risk and minimizes the exposure to single sources and so on. It can be done. And I think the discussion about hydrogen in the UK right now is more about taking using excess green electricity supply in places like Scotland or offshore wind and so on, and turning that into hydrogen. That will be and remain in the bigger energy picture, will remain a small footnote. I don't think, if you do the maths, I don't think we will see on a large scale green hydrogen production in the UK, simply because you would need green electricity for that, and we need all the green electricity that we can potentially realistically produce in the UK. We need all of that for other applications. There will be nothing left to produce hydrogen from it. That hydrogen needs to come. This is the logic. That hydrogen needs to come from somewhere else.
Really interesting. Well, thank you for giving us the perspective on that. That's been really insightful to help us understand the global opportunity of creating hydrogen, and then how that could be a real solution to a lot of the energy needs here in the UK. It's something that I might go back to you and your colleagues to help us understand a little bit more as we're planning out our energy and AI report over the next couple of months. Just as we start to sort of move towards the end here, I wanted to sort of understand a bit more about AI specifically, and your views on how that is enhancing the future of work. We talked about it a bit at the beginning in terms of it augmenting and it being but also at the other end, some people think it's magic and then they're a bit disappointed when it doesn't deliver the magic that they thought. But there's a really big opportunity for AI to really sort of drive efficiencies and productivity right across the board. And I'm conscious that Bosch is a very large organization, has many different teams and operations. You've also done the Tech Compass report, so you've got that sort of understanding of all of the public attitudes to the ways in which people are using technology. So I wanted to get your perspective on where do you think the biggest areas of change are going to happen over the next year, really, in terms of the world of work?
In general, I think the answer would be wherever you are exposed to complex work packages, complex situations, and use human intelligence at this point to handle this complexity, and that is where I think AI will come into play. Will make us more efficient. I have to say, reestablish our competitiveness. I mean, this is a bit the argument we have internally. See, we are on the one hand a world that is drifting apart a bit right now. On the other hand, you need to say we are still up against powerful players out there. China is challenging us in terms of competitiveness and so on. And we need to make sure in Europe that we are not turning into the world's museum, but that we keep our competitiveness. And AI is a powerful tool to increase productivity and competitiveness.
I'd love to just get your perspective on that a little bit as well, actually, because you look across Northern Europe and Eastern Europe as well. So you've got a perspective not just in the UK. You can see that sort of that broader picture. And you mentioned that sort of geopolitical landscape where you've got China on one side. It's often painted as China on one side, the US on the other side, and kind of Europe in the middle. So what's your sort of sense of what are the unique things that the UK and Europe are going to be able to lead on? Are there particular areas? Is it technologies like AI? Is it the ethics and responsibility and security? Or are there other things within this technology space that you think that Europe's going to be able to lead on?
Well, difficult to say, obviously. I mean, if you look at Europe, what do we have? We have, first of all, we have a great education system. We have a lot of talented people, and we have a great industrial heritage still. So we have a lot of ingredients that, for example, the Americans have lost over time or don't have any. I mean, I'm really, really impressed by the way the Americans have reinvented themselves around the tech companies and so on. But if you look at more traditional industrial production, I think we are we're not in a bad place here in Europe. Now, China is quickly developing their industry as well. I mean, if you look at manufacturing today in our time, China is more and more the place to look at when you are asking for where's your competition. I think we should really try to make sure that we use those ingredients. That means the know-how of our people, the creativity of our people, the startups that we come up with, and apply those to make sure that we stay in the game, we stay competitive. Again, back to the startups. You see, the UK has, I think, almost as many newly founded companies as the US. But if you look at the survival rate, it's so much lower than the US, and so much lower than China, for that matter. I think those are really things that we need to work on. And then it's obviously also about how to integrate successful startups once they have scaled, how to potentially integrate them into existing businesses like Bosch. This is something that's on our mind, and it would be a topic for another podcast, by the way. How to organize from an organizational viewpoint the cooperation between an old traditional industrial corporation and a new startup.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll definitely take you up on that, and I would love to work with your team, because we have a lot of businesses right across right across the UK who are working on that pioneering, innovative edge. Some of them have spun out of universities. Some of them are kind of working to solve everything from chip design to efficiencies. And I think the challenge for them, to your point, is how do they scale? And one of the ways that they can scale often is by working with the larger established companies to sort of bring those together. The government has also recognized that as a challenge. They have the challenge around procuring these companies into the public sector. And so they're now also very much open to these consortia, where they're saying to the smaller businesses who have the innovative technology, we'll find a bigger partner to work with, and then come to us and solve these problems. So definitely, I think a lot to work on there. But you're right, that the challenge is around scaling and integration within the organization. So this has been fascinating. And Steffen, thank you so much for sharing all your insights today. Just one last question then. Could you share with us, one of the things you're most excited about that Bosch is working on, leave us with that sort of exciting thing to think about. Maybe for the next podcast we can come and explore. But what's the one thing that's exciting at Bosch at the moment?
Well, I would have to say automated driving, which it's become a little bit quiet in the last few years about automated driving, and we were very bold. Say 8-9 years ago, we said, okay, this is happening very fast, and you're going to have a whole revolution in road traffic. I think things are moving a bit slower than expected, but it is happening and it is coming. And if you look at level 3 driving experiences that are available in the field, those are quite exciting, actually. So we're moving fast towards an even more fulfilling automated driving experience. Give us another 5 years, and I think you're going to see fascinating things out there on the roads.
If you can share with us a little bit, I'd love to understand which part of the autonomous vehicle are Bosch involved with. I mean, is it all of it, or is it particular parts of it?
It's all of it, really. I mean, we are electronics and sensors is basically our core competency more and more in on the automotive side. So and again, it's when we talked about complexity a lot today and around AI, but this is basically the same thing. Your objective is to have an automated driving experience in an urban environment, you're looking at a huge complexity. I mean, much more than, people ask me all the time, why, I mean, we have autopilots in aircraft and had them for decades. Why does it take so long in cars? It's uncomparable. I mean, the level of complexity in an urban environment is so much more than if you're in the air. So yeah, that's where we are working with most of the big players in the world, most of the big vehicle manufacturers, but also the more recent the tech companies focusing on automated driving, and we are as excited as they are.
Yeah, and I think that is going to be one of the big things for 2026, particularly in London, with both Waymo and Uber getting their licenses and announcing they're going to come to London. We've already got Wave here, of course, as well. So I think suddenly this is going to come onto our radar. Almost literally, we're going to see these vehicles driving down the streets, and it's going to accelerate that sort of discussion, both at a public level, but also businesses thinking about how they can lean into it. So fascinating to hear how you guys at Bosch are behind all of those, all parts of that autonomous vehicle revolution. Well, great. Well, Steffen, thank you again for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been so enlightening to hear about all the different aspects of what Bosch is working on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. Have a good day.